Hello, and welcome to episode 533 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, as always, joined by Evan Silva, and free agency is nearly upon us. Yes, the time of year donkey teams will wreck their salary cap by paying for past performance in a different system. It's almost here. It starts next week. Evan, how's it going today?
Going well. We're recording this on Monday morning.
Yep.
March 6th, and the free agent tracker, the full list of free agents will be posted on the website very, very soon. And then by midweek, I'll have up a top 100 with a blurb on each notable guy.
Free agency officially starts March 15th. And so on today's show, we're going to do a little free agency preview, our best at each skill position, our best free agent at each skill position, candidates get overpaid, and a sleeper. As Evan mentioned, his free agency tracker will be up on the site while you're listening to this. Before we get into it here today, best ball season never, ever stops. Friends at Underdog have launched the Big Board $1 million tournament for the 2023 fantasy football season. Best ball does include rookies. Our rankings for that are up. Also, our rankings for rookies and sophomore only drafts on Underdog are up as well. You can download our rankings and upload them directly to Underdog. Give yourself a nice baseline to draft off of. If you don't have an Underdog account yet, promo code ETR at UnderdogFantasy.com for $100 matching sign-up bonus. That's promo code ETR at UnderdogFantasy.com. All right. Let's start at the quarterback position. I think the best, and we're going to have it go over our best at each of the four positions here. I think the best is clearly Lamar Jackson. This Lamar Jackson saga is completely ridiculous, Evan. I mean, they've been negotiating this for 2 years. 2 years. Guaranteed money is the sticking point. Now, you remember that Deshaun Watson got a $230 million contract from the Browns in the midst of all the off-field stuff. The crazy part about that, though, is not the $230 million. That is what it is. $230 million out of that $230 million in Deshaun Watson's contract was fully guaranteed. That has led to guys like Lamar Jackson refusing to accept anything less. And honestly, I don't blame Lamar. I'd rather have Lamar than Deshaun Watson. I'm not sure what Evan thinks, but I'd rather have Lamar
absolutely
than Deshaun Watson. And so for Deshaun Watson to get $230 million guaranteed, Lamar wants that much guaranteed. He wants the full amount guaranteed also, but the Ravens are saying absolutely not. And so they've been going back and forth on this for 2 years. It has been very, very messy. We are reaching a tipping point here where they have to either franchise him or non-exclusive franchise tag him. If they non-exclusive franchise tag him, other teams can sign him to an offer sheet. Ravens have a chance to match. If the Ravens decide not to match, they would get 2 first-round picks. The offering team gets and pays Lamar. This guy's only 26 years old, has been the MVP of the National Football League. Evan, I assume that Lamar Jackson is your best free agent quarterback. Yeah. Obviously, what do you think about how the Ravens should be handling this or how they will handle this?
Yeah, it's Lamar Jackson. He's in his own tier. I mean, yeah he's clearly the number one overall free agent in all of the NFL.
Yes.
Because it's really hard to find a franchise quarterback like that becomes available. And if they go with the non-exclusive franchise tag, then Lamar Jackson is going to be available. He's going to have a buzzy market. Half the NFL needs a quarterback right now. And, he's one of the best 10 quarterbacks easily, I think, in the league. He's been a little inconsistent as a passer, but I mean, he led the NFL in passing touchdowns in a particular year. I think he's got the ability to throw the ball downfield. He's inconsistent. He can run for 1,000 yards in any given year. Like, this is a guy I think he's a good guy on and off the field, respected as a leader. He has such a great relationship with John Harbaugh and his coaches in Baltimore. That's why especially after they hired Todd Monken, which I thought was one of the better coordinator hires of the offseason, I selfishly want to see Lamar Jackson return to Baltimore, but it seems like there's a distinct possibility that he might not.
Yeah. I think the Ravens would be crazy to let him go. I'm not sure that 2 first-round picks is enough, but, it's tough. And one thing I'd say when you're valuing Lamar as a passer, they have had woeful wide receiver cores. I mean, I get that Marquise Brown played reasonably for them at points. I get that Rashad Bateman was reasonable before he got hurt, but they have not had like a robust receiving core. And I understand Mark Andrews is part of that too. They have not had a robust receiving core for Lamar Jackson. whatsoever. So we'll see how it plays out. Anyways, Lamar Jackson, both of our best free agent at the quarterback position. Let's go to candidate to get overpaid. Mine is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know exactly what the market's going to be for Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, he's had a bunch of season-ending injuries. He's 31 years old, certainly not too old. I just think that Jimmy Garoppolo wins in like a Kyle Shanahan setup where he's not asked to do a lot, where he's asked to do like what Brock Purdy was asked to do. And to me, some other team's going to see that and be like, oh, I can win with Jimmy Garoppolo. If you put it on Jimmy Garoppolo to win instead of having him part of a system to win, I think you're going to be pretty disappointed in what you get out of Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think he's a candidate to get overpaid in free agency. Evan, who's your quarterback candidate to get overpaid?
Yeah, I think that the market could dictate that Jimmy Garoppolo gets overpaid because of the quarterback neediness around the league and because he's like the number 4 guy on the list.
Yeah.
And once the first 3 guys sign or are acquired or whatever, then, a team is going to get desperate, and he's, a sellable guy to an ownership group. He's a good looking guy. He has no, character issues, and he's had a lot of success. Like they could take, when the court, like ownership gets involved with quarterback transactions, and they could go, like he's had an awesome record in San Francisco, like win-loss record. And, an ownership group could be, taken by that for sure. So I like that one. I'm going with Derek Carr and Daniel Jones. The numbers that we've heard circulating regarding Daniel Jones, like $45 million a year. And reputable reporters are saying that's what it's going to cost. That might end up costing them Saquon Barkley. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get to the RBs. But yeah, I think Daniel Jones could get overpaid. And I like Daniel Jones. I mean, I think he's on an upward trajectory. That's just an awful lot of money for a guy has limitations.
Yeah.
And then Derek Carr, who we just signed with the Saints this morning that we're doing this podcast. We've only seen the years on his deal, 4 years. We haven't seen the money. I bet it's going to be 4 years and $160 million at minimum.
Yeah.
And to me, he's just a very, very average quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, he was reportedly seeking $35 million a year.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be at least that. The only thing that I would say on Daniel Jones, and I mentioned on the last podcast that we did too, you get into a spot, and if you think Daniel Jones is mediocre, and I would, all jokes about Daniel Jones' side, in real life, I think he's pretty mediocre. You get yourself into a spot where you have to pay a mediocre quarterback $40 million. It's tough, right? And that's goes back to the Anthony Richardson argument for me. You want to try to hit ceilings at the quarterback position, not hit like a 50th percentile outcome. So yeah. Sleeper for me at the quarterback position. Can't really call it a sleeper after what he did last year, but man, Geno Smith, I don't think people realize how good Geno Smith was last year. And I actually would have Geno Smith second on my list among free agents. I'd have Geno Smith slightly ahead of Daniel Jones and Derek Carr. I just think Geno Smith, what he did last year, so accurate. I mean, really had command of the offense. They let him cook more than they let Russ Wilson ever cook. And so, yeah, I don't think people realize how good Geno was last year, and therefore I'll call him a sleeper, even though I know he's not a sleeper. And I do think that he's really likely to go back to Seattle. It's, they resurrected his career, and I think they want him back too. So I think Geno will be back to Seattle. We'll see what the numbers look like, but something in that 30 million range, I'm sure is what Geno will get as well. Evan, who is your sleeper, if you have one, at the quarterback position?
Well, I struggled to find a sleeper. I looked at Jacoby Brissett. I thought Jacoby Brissett did a pretty good job managing the quarterback position until they transitioned to Deshaun Watson. And Jacoby Brissett was better than Deshaun Watson for the Browns last year. Jacoby Brissett is 30 years old. He's a quality backup. And I think he's stretched as anything more than that, but he can go in there and start 4, 5, 6 games and you come out 3-3 or 4-2. And you're feeling pretty good. I think you can get that from Jacoby Brissett. I wound up going with old friend Sam Darnold, however. And, when Sam Darnold went in there last year, he teases you, man. You get little small samples, little bursts. The guy he has the skill set to play in the NFL. I think he has a starting caliber skill set. I think he came into the league a little bit immature. He's still only 25 years old. I think that he's a guy that when he's 28, 29, he's played for, 4 or 5 teams, all of a sudden he's going to have like a Geno Smith type year or like a Rich Gannon type year. Like, I think that is squarely within his range of potential outcomes. And I don't know. I mean, I think that there's an outside chance that he could start for the Panthers in 2023.
Yeah, for sure. And Sam Darnold, like, to start, not last season, but the season before that, I mean, he was playing really well for the first month or two of the season, and the wheels completely.
Yeah, that's the story of his career, is that the wheels will come off.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to running back. I'm gonna remove Tony Pollard and Josh Jacobs from my consideration. They are both expected to get the franchise tag. Tony Pollard officially franchise tagged by the Cowboys just now here on Monday morning. That'll be a 1-year, $10.09 million deal for Tony Pollard, expecting the same thing from Josh Jacobs. The thing about Saquon Barkley is it's complicated, because if they get a long-term deal done with Daniel Jones, I think they're almost certainly going to franchise tag Saquon Barkley. However, if they have to use the franchise tag on Daniel Jones, they cannot use it on Saquon Barkley, which would put Saquon Barkley on the open market. Obviously, then in that case, Saquon Barkley would be the best running back, I think. Although I've seen people say they prefer Josh Jacobs to Saquon Barkley. I don't see that, but I've seen people say they prefer that. I prefer Saquon Barkley to Josh Jacobs. He's 26 years old. Freakish athletic ability, has been boom or bust. But man, I think Saquon clearly, to me, a cut above Josh Jacobs. But yeah, I'm curious what you think about that, and who would you have as your best free agent running back?
Yeah, Josh Jacobs actually younger than Saquon Barkley. Josh Jacobs is only 25. I think it's neck and neck. I have Saquon Barkley a little bit above Josh Jacobs, and then those two guys a little bit above Tony Pollard, and then down to Miles Sanders and David Montgomery and Alexander Mattison, who we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. Yeah, my best free agent running back is Saquon Barkley. I like how efficient he is in the passing game. He never needs to come off the field. I thought he ran the ball maybe the best that he has in the NFL when he was healthy. This past year, look, there were moments where, it just seemed like there were 6 defenders around him at all times. And so that, you remember he had that sort of like mid to late season slump, and was he running out of gas? He wound up finishing pretty strong. I think he's the best running back on the market, but I do think that Josh Jacobs is pretty close.
Let's go to the sleeper at the running back position. I think there's a case can be made for 2 guys here. I'll go with Alexander Mattison, who was stuck behind Dalvin Cook for the first 4 years of his career. Alexander Mattison, though, is still only 24 years old. He's had some awesome games when Dalvin Cook's been out. He's had a couple really, really poor games, but man, I don't think there's that big a difference between Alexander Mattison and most starting running backs in today's NFL. I think you could get him for a reasonable price in free agency and plug him in as the 1A or the 1B in a committee very, very quickly and very, very productively. And so, yeah, I think the depth of the running back free agent market and the depth of the running back draft market is going to lead to some really depressed prices on some of these guys, and I feel bad for the running backs. Their careers are so short. They're risking so much injury, and they're like really, really dedicated their life to this. They're really, really good. It's just, bottom line is, it's just very replaceable. So Alexander Mattison, I think, could be had relatively cheaply, and I think he can be very productive. He would be my sleeper free agent at running back.
Yeah, I really like Alexander Mattison. If I owned Alexander Mattison in a dynasty league right now, I'd be pretty excited, because I think he's going to wind up with a 1A job. I think he's a 1A back. He runs with a lot of physicality. He can break tackles, and he can play in the passing game. And that's pretty much all you need. Yeah. He takes care of the football. We've seen him have big games before. He can absolutely handle the load. I mean, he's built to handle the load. The other guy I would go with, or I think there are 2 more interesting guys. One is Deontay Foreman, who he has limitations. He's got to be in a committee with a running back who's like better in the passing game. But man, I mean, he's Derrick Henry light, and we've seen that. I mean, he had monster games, and he's one of the very few running backs who's recovered from the torn Achilles. It took him a half decade to get there, but he got back there, and he had some awesome games this past year. Another guy who had some awesome games this past year and the year before, Rashad Penny. He's a free agent. Mm-hmm. He's had a lot of injury problems. I mean, really, really bad luck ever since he came out of San Diego State. But he is a a speed score specimen. I remember when he was coming out at San Diego State, he was like 225 pounds, had like a really, really high speed score, ran really, really well. And then when you see it, when he's been healthy, man, this dude can really, really run the ball. It's easy to forget that he was the main back in Seattle for the first, 4, 5, 6 games last year. And he was hyper productive, and then he got hurt. And then, it was the Kenneth Walker show after that. But I think he's going to be real cheap. I think Rashad Penny will come really, really cheap. He can be your number 2 back and your starter goes down. Like, this dude can give you a lot in the run game.
Yeah, the obvious connection for Rashad Penny would be Tampa, because they just cut Leonard Fournette. Dave Canales knows Rashad Penny from his time there in Seattle. So, yeah, maybe they'll take a look there at Rashad Penny. I like both of those. I don't think anyone's really going to get overpaid at the running back position. I think that the league has wisened up to some degree. I think a candidate, though, to get overpaid would be Miles Sanders. Is there really that big of a difference between Miles Sanders and, say, Alexander Madison or Deontay Foreman or Rashad Penny or Damian Harris or Devin Singletary? I like Miles Sanders. I thought he was awesome for the Eagles last year, but I don't know that I'd be looking to spend a ton of money on him. So I think he's a candidate to me to get overpaid. Any other candidates for you, running back position in free agency, to get overpaid?
Not really, because running backs really don't get overpaid anymore. But the guy that I guess kind of first came to mind would be David Montgomery.
Yep.
And David Montgomery is a jack of many trades and not really a master of any of them. We've gone over this, even going back to Iowa State, the dude gets caught from behind. He's not really explosive in space. He does everything well.
Mm-hmm.
But was he even better than Khalil Herbert in Chicago? I don't know. No. Certainly not by any. If it was by a negligible distance. But I think that he's a good guy, and any coaching staff would feel comfortable having him as their lead back. And therefore, I think he could get a deal, maybe, $6-7 million or something a year. And you could get, what's Khalil Herbert getting paid, $785,000 a year.
Yep. All right. This wide receiver free agency class has to be the worst of all time, or one of the worst of all time. I mean, this is pathetic. I think Jacoby Myers is the best wide receiver in the class, but I don't even really like Jacoby Myers that much. I mean, this dude is a former undrafted free agent who I think, played well, but certainly is not a load-bearing wide out. He is a slot type.
Allergic to the end zone.
He might be the best wide receiver in this free agency class, though, which is absolutely insane. I mean, he's 26 years old, but still, I think he's the best. And I also think he's a candidate to get overpaid. I mean, we're talking about $12 million, $15 million. I've even heard some people say $16 million a year for Jacoby freaking Myers. So I think he could be the best and get overpaid in this class. There are some other guys here with bigger names, though, in this class. Evan, who would you consider the best of this free agent wide receiver class?
Yeah, I went with Odell Beckham. And that's because I think he's definitely the best. It's just we don't know where he is from a health standpoint. We don't know where he is from a mindset standpoint. I don't think he's going to get a lot of money. You remember last year, it seemed like at one point that he might get signed and spend time with a contender or something. That never happened. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that was because he wasn't where he needed to be from a health standpoint. So I don't know. I think he's the most talented receiver in the class, maybe even by far. But again, I don't know what he has left. I don't know where he is from a health standpoint.
I mean, I wasn't surprised he didn't play last year because he tore his ACL. So he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl, which was February, whatever. And so it's really hard to come back the following season when you tear your ACL that late in the year. Hopefully Odell is ready to go. I like that one. Certainly if he's healthy. For sleeper at the free agency wide receiver class, pretty clearly to me, DJ Chark. And, I played DJ Chark a bunch in DFS. I thought DJ Chark was a really good pickup. Real life for the Lions last year. He didn't get the ball a ton last year because Jared Goff loves to just keep it short over the middle. But in the right setup, I think DJ Chark could actually have a pretty good impact. We know he already has 1,000-yard season for the Jacksonville Jaguars under his belt a few years ago. And so maybe there's a sneaky big market for DJ Chark I'm not aware of. I don't know. But right now, I haven't heard a lot about him. He'd be a really good steal for some team, at $8, $9, $10 million a year, something like that. I think. What do you think about your favorite sleeper in this wide receiver free agency class?
And DJ Chark finished the season really strong. He's a guy that, I don't think he's ever going to be like a high volume target commander, but he can serve like a lot of like a tactical purpose on the field because the dude could just flat out run, and he's tall and he's long, and you have to account for him because he's got that big play potential at all times. So he's a guy who can kind of like tilt the field a little bit and make your offense better, even if he's only getting 4 or 5 targets a game. My sleeper, I have 2 of them. They're both younger guys who we've seen flashes from. Paris Campbell, 25 years old, and Darius Slayton, 26 years old. Darius Slayton, he can rip the lid off. It's just he's inconsistent in terms of his hands, his routes, that kind of thing, but he's got that big play potential for sure, and he can serve a tactical purpose. And then Paris Campbell, I don't know. It seemed like we needed to write him off at certain times, and he'll come back and have, a couple good games. He can play in the slot. I mean, he ran 4.27 coming out of Ohio State. I don't know if he still has that kind of speed. He's had a lot of injuries, but when he's been healthy, he's been a pretty good slot receiver. So those would be 2 guys young. I think they'll be somewhat affordable, and I'm not sure that we've seen them play their best football yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Paris Campbell, I actually played in DFS a couple times this past year during that stretch that Evan was referring to. And then at the end of the year, I was fading him in best ball, and he was just thankfully fell off the face of the earth. So yeah, he'll be very cheap. I'll say that for sure. Overpaid at wide receiver. Mine is Allen Lazard. Allen Lazard is already 27 years old. And maybe Allen Lazard does some better, like real life things that people would say, oh, he's a good blocker, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, man. I just think Allen Lazard has had massive opportunities for the Packers and shown he can be very little more than a role player. And I'm concerned that some team is going to try to peg Allen Lazard as some alpha type wide receiver. And I think that will go very, very badly. So Allen Lazard is my candidate to get overpaid, not Christian Kirk levels of overpaid, but overpaid. Evan, who's your candidate to get overpaid at wide receiver?
Well, just, zooming out and looking at the free agent wide receiver class from like a context standpoint, I think a bunch of dudes could get overpaid because teams need wide receivers, and there aren't many good ones left, or there aren't many good ones available in the draft or free agency. And there are like young dudes that like teams could talk themselves into. And I think one of them is McCole Hardman, who's 25 years old. He's played on winning teams, which I don't think that matters a lot. But again, teams are going to be wanting to talk themselves in it. And I think he's definitely going to leave Kansas City, because, they've got Sky Moore and, I don't think they're going to pay McCole Hardman. So I think that he could get overpaid for sure.
Agreed. And we didn't mention Juju during this segment here, but I do think the Chiefs are more likely to bring back Juju than McCole Hardman. I think McCole Hardman, and we should start an award, the first annual Christian Kirk, How the F Did He Get So Much Money award. And this year's award could go to McCole Hardman. I don't think it's as crazy, maybe as other people do, or as Evan does, to think that McCole Hardman can take a leap outside of Kansas City, but we haven't seen anything so far to think that he can separate or get open at the level he needs to. The Chiefs just need that so bad, Chiefs guys need to get open off the line of scrimmage. And so maybe he'll go to a system that fits him better. I'm not writing off McCole Hardman, I guess is what I'm trying to say, as still having a pretty good NFL impact, but I do agree with Evan. He's going to get paid in a big way, and people are going to be like, oh my God, this is so much money for McCole Hardman. Last one here, tight ends. Obviously, it's never a deep class because there's never enough good tight ends. My best and overpaid, actually, is Dalton Schultz. He's 26 years old. Obviously, fantasy players are well aware of what Dalton Schultz can do from a compiling perspective. There's a lot of 6 for 54s, and 7 for 66 and a touchdowns in Dalton Schultz's range. And obviously, that's very, very good for tight end in today's game. I think the Cowboys should be trying to get him back. He seems to have something really good going with Dak. We'll see what happens there, but I think it's going to be expensive. And so best and overpaid at tight end for me in this free agent class is Dalton Schultz. Evan, start with your best.
I like that answer. I had Dalton Schultz as the best as well. I think you summed it up pretty well. I think the Cowboys kind of need to keep him around. Like their weapons cast is just, it's not that great right now. And this is a guy who has an obvious rapport with their quarterback, and he doesn't ever have to come off the field because he can block competently. So, yeah, I think that they're going to pay him, and I think that they probably should. And I also think he's the best tight end in the class. But again, it's not that impressive of tight end class, though, either.
Yep. Sleeper is a no-brainer for me. You guys should be able to get this one without even hearing what I'm going to say.
Let me see if I can guess.
Go ahead.
Irv Smith?
No, come on.
Okay.
Mike Gesicki, one of the best athletes at the position
Penn State, of course,
in the entire NFL, showed an ability to really win, I think, as a receiver. He did not fit the Mike McDaniel system whatsoever. Like, they did not even give him a chance. He barely played for much of the year. I thought when he did get out there, though, he was reasonable. Mike Gesicki is still just 27 years old, second contract, obviously. All these guys, free agents, will be getting second contracts. But I think there's a chance for Mike Gesicki breakout in a place that actually wants to use him. The problem, of course, is that coaches have to be okay with it. Understand, Mike Gesicki is not going to block. He's not going to be physical. You're essentially acquiring an oversized wide receiver under the guise of tight end. And so I think if coaches acknowledge that, he could be a sleeper here. I do not think he will be expensive. Any sleepers for you, Evan, at the tight end position?
Well, I had Mike Gesicki as my overpaid.
Okay.
But a lot of Kobe Fleener vibes. You remember Kobe Fleener, I'm sure. I think that what they clearly, I mean, whatever team acquires Mike Gesicki, and I think you alluded to it, is that they have to have a plan for him if they're going to maximize what he can do. And he can be a playmaking receiving tight end, but he can't be on the field in running situations. So, in situations where, there's even like the threat of the run. I mean, this dude had a lot of goose eggs last year. They gave him the franchise tag. The Dolphins did. And they didn't have a plan for him. They were just like, all right, he's a talented young player. Let's keep him around. But I think he's definitely going to walk. He's still really young. Isn't he like 24?
He's 27, I think.
Okay, yeah, never mind. He's not that young anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that he could get overpaid, but I don't know. We'll see. My sleepers, I have two. I went with Irv Smith.
Okay.
I know he's disappointed the crap out of us, like almost every year. Every year. He's 24 though.
Yeah. That's insane. It's insane that he's only 24 years old.
Yeah. Well, he came out, he wasn't even of legal drinking age when he came out of Alabama. A lot of bad injury luck. But I think that he could come relatively affordable. If I was him, I'd be wanting to go like the Evan Ingram route and like give me a 1-year deal, and I'll try to parlay that into something. I mean, he's flashed to us when he's been given up, or when he's been healthy enough to have opportunities. Foster Moreau was the other one. I actually almost put him in overpaid because I think that he's a player that a team could talk themselves into paying a lot of money because he can theoretically be a 3-down tight end. I also think he could be a sleeper to be, a guy who catches 70 balls for 770 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. And like we're talking about him in fantasy.
Yep. By the way, we didn't mention Evan Ingram on here. Widely expected that Evan Ingram will get the franchise tag. That will be a 1-year, $11.345 million deal for Evan Ingram. I mean, certainly a lot of money for a guy who less than a year ago, or roughly a year ago, people had just completely left for dead. And that's what Evan's alluding to with the Irv Smith deal. You come out, you play well. Next thing you know, you get $11.345 million guaranteed. How rich, Evan Ingram. Congrats. Okay. That is going to do it for this little free agency preview here. We'll be back soon to recap all the fallout from actual free agency, which will be going down the week of March 13th. Be sure to subscribe anywhere podcasts are found and on the YouTube machine. Ton of free podcasts and content coming your way this offseason. For Evan, for producer Luke, I'm Adam. Good luck, everybody.